Hello all, welcome to Lucid Main's Current Affairs program brought to you by Ekam IAS, and today we will be discussing about data localization. Now data localization is in news because recently the Reserve Bank of India had refused to extend the deadline for localization of payment data in India. Earlier the RBI had issued a notification on storage of payment system data on 6th April 2018 which sought for data localization. The notification also states that the Federal Bank needed unfettered access to data stored with these service providers to better monitor the security measures adopted by technology dependent payment providers, and the notification also states that this will prevent the misuse of payment data stored with the intermediaries and third party vendors. Firms such as MasterCard, Visa and American Express have in recent months met with the Indian policymakers, including Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, to push for an extension of the RBI's deadline. They also repeatedly sought the dilution of the RBI directive, requesting that they be allowed to store data both locally and at their offshore offices. This practice is widely referred to as data mirroring, that is storing data both locally and in offshore offices. So what is data localization? Data localization is the practice of storing data on any device that is physically present within the borders of the country where the data is generated. Also, data localization broadly means that a live copy of all personal data collected within India must be stored in Indian servers or data centers. In addition, the data localization requirements allows the government to deem some personal data as critical, which is required to be stored and processed only in the country. RBI says unfettered access to data stored by system providers and third party vendors in the payment ecosystem will ensure better monitoring. Data localization norms require full end-to-end transaction details or information collected, processed and stored inside the country, often before being transferred globally, and usually transferred to any other country only after complying with the local data protection laws. Now, free flow of digital data, especially that which can impact government or regional operations, is restricted by some governments. While there is enough reason to support data localization, misguided practices can have harmful consequences for citizens and economies alike. Now, under the RBI direction, even the multinational firms like Visa and MasterCard will have to ensure that Indian customer data is stored locally. What are the various committees that recommended data localization? The guidelines of the RBI are in addition to the draft Personal Data Protection Bill, which was tabled by a committee led by Justice B.N. Srikrishna. Chris Gopalakrishnan Cloud Panel wanted localization of cloud data, which was a big blow to corporate giants. This panel submitted its report to Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Now, data localization requirements for payment firms are required under the notification by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, the Ministry of Electronics and Information System mandated all central and state government departments to store their data within our territory. Also, outside of India's border, the OECD, the first action plan of the OECD called as the Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Project, which refers to the tax avoidance strategies that help in shifting profits to low or no tax locations, has been on addressing the tax challenges on digital economy. So what will happen now? Though several firms are yet to comply with the norms, nothing is going to create any disturbances in the payment system in the country. According to the sources, the central bank is expected to examine the progress by the payment firms during the coming days on a case-by-case basis. It may be noted that the move to adhere to the norms within the stipulated time frame or be ready for regulatory actions for not doing so has drawn criticism from foreign payment firms, which have held several rounds of discussion with central bank and the government to discuss their concerns, including the lack of clarity on certain matters, the security risk and costs associated with data localization, and they also want the government to extend the deadline up to 12 months. Now the payment firms like MasterCard and Visa are concerned that setting up of data storage to India will cost them millions of dollars. However, the central bank refuses to ease the norms or extend the deadline, saying that the firms were given sufficient time of 6 months and there are no plans to change anything on data storage plan, that is the data localization plan. There are likely chances that the payment firms might be fined for not complying with the norms or delaying the process. In the last financial year, the total volume in the payment system, including ATMs, debit and credit cards, the electronic clearing and prepaid payment instruments, was reported at 23,584 million and rupees, more than 2 lakh crores in value terms, according to the data by the RBI. A major part of the payment is routed through Visa and MasterCard. Now, what are the advantages of data localization? One is that gives the government better access to information. It strengthens the domestic law against online crimes, protects critical personal data and prevents foreign surveillance, boosts domestic trade and create employment, and harness data for futuristic artificial intelligence based services. It is expected that the data localization norms will give a boost to Indian payment gateways such as CCA Avenue, PayU, BillDesk, beside the government-owned card network RuPay. Now, more tax compliance for e-companies which do business in India without having any physical presence. Payment systems can be used as tools or weapons for foreign policy. Data localization measures are essential for gaining easy access to data during investigations. Now we will look into the last 4 points. What specifically is the advantage related with these points? One is that it boosts domestic trade and creates employment. Now Indian companies directly or indirectly needs information of skilled and unemployed youth and other information which will be made easier by data localization. Now e-commerce companies depend on data to access present trends and estimate their future demand in respective fields. Next is more tax compliance for e-companies which do business in India without having any physical presence. Data localization will force the online service providers to come within the Indian tax net. E-commerce companies have managed to escape tax liability in India till now due to loopholes in tax laws. As per international tax norms, an enterprise can be taxed in India only if it has a permanent establishment or a fixed place of business in the country. Till now, e-companies could do business in India without having any physical presence. They would set up a subsidiary in India to provide sales supports to clients and also last mile delivery services. However, the core operations of e-commerce companies happen wherever the server is located. The servers are generally located in tax havens. This provided unfettered tax relief to the digital payment companies in India. Now, data localization will remove the ambiguity surrounding taxability of such income. It will force offshore digital payment service providers to reconsider their business model and tax liability and eventually bring them into the Indian tax net. Now, payment systems can be used as a tools or weapons of foreign policy. How? Because payment systems in Russia stopped working for a few days when Russia invaded Crimea and America cut off Russia's access to SWIFT payment system. Now, America is also close to cutting off Iran's access to SWIFT payment systems. This is how payment systems can be used as a tools or weapons of foreign policy. Now, pending an important global debate as to who owns data, the digital exhaust of Indians continues to be used offshore to profile and traffic them. Therefore, RBI's action around localization of payment data is a welcome move. Now next, data localization measures are essential for gaining easy access to data during investigations. Government sources say that the stringent data localization measures are essential for gaining easier access to data during investigations. The Justice Sri Krishna Committee in its report accompanying the draft Personal Data Protection Bill released on July 27 noted that 8 of the top 10 most accessed websites in India are owned by US entities. This reality has often hindered Indian law enforcement agencies when investigating routine crimes or crimes with a cyber element. Police officials are forced to rely on long and arduous bilateral process with the US government to obtain electronic evidence from US communication providers. The data localization requirement seeks to correct this. So, how Indian enforcement agencies seek information from USA? Indian law enforcement relies on outdated mutual legal assistance treaty to obtain data stored by US companies in US, because in US the US law effectively bars these companies from disclosing user data to foreign law enforcement authorities. Now companies are allowed to share data such as content of an email or message only upon receiving a federal warrant from the US authorities. So data localization will make receiving of various data related to some certain crime easier for Indian law enforcement agencies. Next, what are the challenges associated with it? One is that the data localization requirement in the bill is regressive and goes against the fundamental tenets of a liberal economy. One of the dissenting members of the RBI committee which recommended data localization even commented that the data localization requirement in the bill is regressive and goes against the fundamental tenets of liberal economy. Localization can provide data only for crimes that have been committed in India where both the perpetrator and victims are situated in India. Now transnational terrorism, cyber crimes and money laundering will often involve individuals and accounts that are not Indian and therefore will not be stored in India. The committee, while imposing data localization, didn't tackle how this data will be obtained by the police authorities. It is not clear how maintaining data in India will make it more secure or reduce foreign surveillance. It also does not boost domestic trade, as countries that have implemented such measures have gravely suffered in the long run with their gross domestic product falling in a staggered manner. Now startups in India may suffer equally, as they will no longer be able to leverage the well established and experienced, high quality and cost effective offshore cloud services. Now data localization will create bottlenecks for companies to work seamlessly across borders. Another important aspect is that the critical personal data has to reside in India only. However, the industry continues to be rife with speculations and uncertainty in this regard as to what constitutes critical personal data, because this is neither defined nor have any parameters been provided for it. Since the primary reason for localization is to grant the government access to personal data, the surveillance power of the government should be mentioned. However, there is no clarity and leaves it open-ended by stating that processing personal data in the interest of the security of the state will be permitted according to law and if it is necessary. So concluding, there should not be any restriction on cross-border data movement. Even for ease of doing business, it is positive to have clarity on rules and regulations. The question arises as to whether data localization is an easy surveillance tool for the government disguised under the garb of protectionist measures such as making data accessible and bolstering local industries, or a genuine effort towards securing the rights of owners of personal data. Bringing more mutual legal assistance treaties and better enforcing these treaties may have been more suitable approach at this stage. Now data localization mandate should be narrowly tailored. Ideally data should be localized based on the sector. For instance, military, intelligence and law enforcement might need strict localization rules. Now, India is a large market and has a large talent pool. So most of these companies are here for the long run. We are moving towards a model where a lot of customer data is actually getting captured through the Internet of Things, and therefore a privacy bill will strengthen customer rights. Thank you.